I'm sorry?
We're the last item on the agenda? Mm-hmm. Okay, and,
Well, you're the only item on the agenda
oh, really?
other than the
Consent
omnibus.
agenda? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and I was clarifying with Mark that if a question comes from the audience,
Yeah, you got kind of off to the side there, didn't you? Mike.
8:30.
What's that?
Sure you have everything from the county.
Right, right.
I got a couple of things afterwards for you too.
Okay.
Not critical, just a couple things to share.
Good.
Got everybody? We do.
8:30.
And Dave and Dorothy have a presentation.
I'm sorry?
Dave and Dorothy
Which door?
Kennett, K-E-N-N-E-T-T.
Call to order, a regular meeting for the Normal Town Council for November 3rd, 2014. Please call the roll.
Mayor Kus.
Here.
Mrs. Reese. Here. Mr. Fritzen. Here. Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
Mr. Preston.
Here.
Mr. Scott.
Here.
Ms. Gaines. Here.
We'll begin with a pledge of allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first item of business is the omnibus agenda, and these are items that will be voted on as a whole by the council unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion. And I would like to be excused on voting in on any bills I may have incurred my duties as mayor. Mr. Fritzen?
Yes, I'd ask to be excused from voting on Bloomington offset invoice.
Thank you. Mrs. Reese?
I'd like to be excused from voting on any bills submitted by Advocate Broman or any bills I've incurred in the course of my duties.
Thank you. Motion for approval.
Move approval.
Second. Under consideration on the omnibus tonight are approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of October 20th, 2014, and approval of town of normal expenditures for payment as of October 29th, 2014. We have a motion to waive the formal bid process and approve the purchase of biodiesel fuel from Evergreen FS Incorporated of Bloomington, Illinois. We have a resolution authorizing the extension of a license agreement with Connect Transit for implementation of a passenger information display system in the Uptown Station. We have a resolution extending a license agreement with Peoria Charter Coach Company for access to the Uptown Station as a transportation provider. We have an ordinance vacating utility and sewer easements in Lot 1 of the Bradford Rab subdivision. We have an ordinance conditionally and partially approving the final plat of the re-subdivision of part of Lot 21 in the 14th addition to the Northtown subdivision by expedited process. And I wish my description could have been by expedited process there. And we have an ordinance approving a special use permit for the Central Illinois Holiness Association at 216 Jersey Avenue. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Reese.
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen.
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy.
Aye.
Mr. Preston.
Aye.
Mr. Scott.
Aye.
Ms. Gaines.
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The omnibus agenda is approved. We have no general, yes, we do. It is a general order, which is a resolution to approve a maintenance and right of first refusal agreement between the Town of Normal and Emmanuel Bible Foundation for the Broadview Mansion property and approval of a required general fund budget amendment for fiscal year 2014-2015.
Move approval.
Second. Thank you. Before we begin, we have a presentation on this project from the Emmanuel Bible Foundation board members. ISU President Emeritus David Strand and Dorothy Kennett are here to talk about this project.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is David Strand, and I am a member of the Board of Directors of the Emmanuel Bible Foundation. With me this evening is Dorothy Kennett, President of our board. Dorothy and I will share in this brief presentation to the council. Initially, Dorothy and I want to thank Mayor Coos, members of the council, and City Manager Mark Peterson for the opportunity to appear before you. Additionally, we are grateful for the encouragement and support our board has received from you and your staff over the past 18 months as we have discussed and refined the agreement that is on the council agenda this evening. It is worth noting for the purpose of our discussion that Broadview Mansion and the Emmanuel Bible Foundation are separate entities, and the proposal before the council deals only with the property known as Broadview Mansion. Broadview Mansion is the more than 100-year-old historic property located at 1301 South Fell Avenue in Normal. The Emmanuel Bible Foundation is the organizational entity with which Broadview is allied. The combination of the two entities has resulted in the preservation of an historically significant property and a broad spectrum of programmatic initiatives that have benefited individuals, groups, organizations, and the community. In the next few minutes, Dorothy will provide some background information regarding the history of Broadview Mansion, as well as how this proposal evolved. Then I will comment briefly on what is taking place, as well as what is envisioned as part of the programming at Broadview Mansion. Finally, I will highlight some of the key elements of this agreement. Following our presentation, we will be pleased to entertain questions or receive comments from the council. Dorothy?
Well, I am Dorothy Kennett, and I am the current president of the board of Emmanuel Bible Foundation, and I'm nearing the end of a 2-year term. However, I became a member of the board in 2003. I never envisioned it being a long time engagement, but as you know, those things do kind of happen. My task tonight, as David has said, is to provide some of the historical background regarding Broadview Mansion and its founding family, and I'm most interested in telling you something about the family, which is something you perhaps have not heard about in the past. The architect was Paul Orr Moretz, utilizing the arts and crafts prairie design for the structure, and the name from this residence reflected the wonderful broad view that the Van Leers enjoyed from this site. And as you can picture where the house sits, it's relatively high compared to a lot of the part of the around the area below it. And there were not many houses, I'm sure, when this house was built over 100 years ago, and they surely did have a very broad view. Today, the home features fine pieces of original craftsmanship that have been beautifully maintained, and many of its furnishings are original to the house and would be staying with the house. In addition, the leaded windows are original, and the copper gutters remain in place. The brick wrought iron wall around the property was added later. Now for the Van Leers themselves, Mr. Van Leer, whose first name was Bird. Did you think you'd ever hear someone whose name was Bird? He was born in 1868 in Pennsylvania, and then his family and the other members, the children in the family, moved to a farming area near Decatur, and later they moved to Normal. Mr. Van Leer studied at Illinois Wesleyan for a time, and then his father became ill, and it became necessary for him to help the father provide for the family. And he became an employee of Kaiser Hardware and Plumbing, which is the building where that business is still standing. And it's the one downtown that is opposite downtown Bloomington, opposite the BCPA, whereas there still is a plumbing and a hardware business. So he became just a worker for Mr. Kaiser at that particular time. Later, he became a partner and part owner. His wife, Margaret, was from Lexington, and her family was a banking family in Lexington. She was born in 1870. She was educated at Illinois Wesleyan and then at Northwestern University, and she became an English teacher at Illinois Wesleyan. When Byrd passed away in 1933, his widow Margaret had the distinctive bell tower constructed in honor and in memory of him. And I'm going to add here that she had other visions, and I can just picture her mind planning all of these things. She wanted a kind of a complex in the yard, and she planned a chapel, and then she planned kind of a small amphitheater. And it was to the south where there is just quite a large piece of land, and she had this architecturally drawn that she was going to plan to have this theater where they could have plays, they could have readings, they could have musicals, lots of different things. So then she decided that she would take all of this and she wanted to give it to Moody Bible Foundation. And thus, I think the name kind of came about. And she offered it to Moody and wanted them to use it as an auxiliary campus and to teach Bible classes, I guess, from there. And Moody said no. Moody was not interested. And so at that time, she kind of stopped this planning she was doing, and nothing further was done about the chapel or the amphitheater that she was planning to build. The Van Leers were prominent members of the Bloomington Normal community, as you can imagine, and later in life traveled the world. They had no children. Margaret, who had a broad interest in introducing and involving youth in music, art, theater, and writing, established Emmanuel Bible Foundation in 1944. She served as its first executive director. For the past 70 years, the Emmanuel Bible Foundation has functioned as a not-for-profit organization, fulfilling a variety of functions. Foremost among its offerings have been the Women's Holiday Celebration and the Layman Lenten Breakfast. Lectures, concerts, grants, and scholarships for youth have kind of rounded out their activities. And finally, I'd like to provide you with some information regarding the factors that contributed to the introduction of this agreement and some of my personal thoughts. I've already told you when I became a member of the board, two of the major activities were and still are the Women's Christian Celebration. And this year, the tickets are already out, and we are expecting over 700 guests the first Saturday morning in December. The biggest one I can remember nearly killed us all. We had almost 1,400 tickets sold. 1,000 went for the breakfast itself. We had so many tickets sold that they cut it off, and they had a lunch as well. So we had 1,000 people for breakfast and 400 more for lunch at noon, and the speaker had to do 2 programs, and it was more than any of us could undertake. So we scaled down a little, but 700 is an amazing number of women to have at this celebration. The foundation has always been cognizant of and sensitive to the wishes of Mrs. Van Leer to provide programming for music, art, drama, writing, and other types of creative expression. David's going to tell you about some of the latest ideas, lady. Now, by 2008, when the state and world economies were suffering, I would enter Broadview Mansion, and I wonder what on earth was ever going to happen to this beautiful place. And in the fall of 2011, the board engaged in the visioning process, which resulted in the conclusion that the foundation itself could function successfully for an indefinite period of time. However, Some of the costs associated with maintaining the property would eventually lessen our ability to share exceptional programming and events, as well as awarding grants and scholarships. We just could not do it all. None of us was happy about this. In 2012, I was elected president of the board. In the spring of 2013, with great reluctance, we voted to interview several prospective realtors with the thought of putting Broadview Mansion up for sale on the open market. Each board member, including me, had that hollow feeling after the vote was taken, as we did not perceive that there was any other viable solution. At about this same time, board member David Strand began talking to city manager Mark Peterson about alternatives that would preserve historic Broadview Mansion. And David, now I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dorothy. I hope that gives you some important background information on the history of Broadview Mansion and the Van Leers. As noted earlier, I will devote the remaining moments of this presentation to comment on what is taking place or planned for Broadview Mansion, and then highlight some of the key elements of the agreement that is before you. In a moment, the screen will display a slide that depicts the vision that our board has adopted regarding the future of Broadview Mansion. The name Van Leer Center at Broadview Mansion recognizes Mr. and Mrs. Van Leer, who built Broadview Mansion and founded the Emmanuel Bible Foundation. If you will direct your attention to the vertical rectangle on the lower left side of the screen, you will note the title, The Van Leer Academy of Music and Art. A number of program initiatives have been undertaken and are scheduled that will enable artistically talented people to present programs for individuals who are interested in experiencing these types of events in such an historical setting. The middle rectangle, captioned Broadview Mansion, describes some of the activities associated with both preserving and promoting this historically significant property. Various events will be scheduled to make the facility available to the public. And here I might add that what we have envisioned is that there will be tours available for groups, and there will be docents who will help lead those tours, docents who are knowledgeable about the history of Broadview Mansion. And then there will be certain types of events that will be scheduled there, events that are either initiated by the council or by the Emmanuel Bible Foundation Board, or if there are community-related activities that are requested there that are consistent with the integrity of the mansion as a historically significant property, those will be available. So we want to make certain that the public is aware that this is not going to be a closed environment. This is going to be a historically significant property that will be available to the public. The rectangle on the right, titled Faith, Connect, and Study, focuses on individual small group and large group activities that will take place at Broadview Mansion or some other local venue. The purpose of these activities is to bring people with common interests together for their mutual benefit. Finally, I want to comment briefly on some of the key elements of this document so that everyone is aware that the approval of the agreement is mutually beneficial to the town of Normal, its citizens who are interested in historical preservation, and the Emmanuel Bible Foundation. Here is a brief overview of just some of the key elements of the agreement. The town is not buying Broadview Mansion. In fact, town officials, many of whom are seated before me this evening, have indicated that they're interested in preserving this historically significant property, but not owning it. The Emmanuel Bible Foundation retains ownership of the property. However, should the foundation ever decide to sell Broadview Mansion, the town has a right of first refusal to purchase the property for a pre-established price as set forth in the agreement. 2, While the agreement has provisions that extend over 20 years, either the town or foundation can terminate the agreement with appropriate notice to the other party. Such notice is defined in the agreement. 3, the foundation and town have agreed that Broadview Mansion be designated an historic landmark under the Town of Normal Historic Preservation Ordinance. 4, the town will assist the foundation with the ongoing operating and maintenance costs associated with Broadview Mansion in exchange for the preservation of the property as an historic site and in order for the town to have free use of the property for designated types of activities. These two parties may also partner on projects that restore or remodel the property in a manner consistent with its historic landmark status. And finally, approval of this agreement will guarantee to the town, its citizens, and the Emmanuel Bible Foundation that Broadview Mansion will remain an historically important and significant property for the foreseeable future. Thank you for your attention and the opportunity to make the presentation this evening. Now, Dorothy and I would be pleased to receive any comments or questions from the council members.
Comments or questions from council? Mrs. Reese?
Thank you. I appreciate your information. Do you have a timeline in mind for offering perhaps tours, or maybe that's already available and we just don't know about that? Can you give us a little more information on that?
I'd be happy to do that. At the present time, people who would inquire would be able to have a tour of the property. There's a person named Jan Godby, who is the executive director, who spends part of the week there as her work schedule, and she has taken a number of groups or individuals on tours, so that is in place now. However, once this agreement is signed, then a formal process will be put in place, and you'll probably be hearing more publicity about the availability of the property. One of the misnomers of the property is that somehow this is a private, closed property, and that unfortunately is a misstatement or misunderstanding. And so there have been groups, and there have been a number of people who've come up to me prior to the meeting or during the meeting and have said that they've taken the tour. They're very impressed with the property. So we hope to dispel any misunderstanding about the availability of this property for tours, especially for people who are interested in historically significant properties.
One more on that line. Thank you. That's good. That's good to know it can happen right now, and it will probably happen in a more formal phase as time goes on. We're a media-savvy world today, and so I'm wondering, have you all thought about establishing a website for that property so that the public gets to be familiar with it, perhaps as a site for weddings or other occasions? I don't know whether we've talked about it even with the town, but
There is a
There is a
website.
website.
Yes.
there is one right now.
Yes.
And is that how people could go on and book something, or?
Well, I don't know about booking directly. I
Okay.
suppose it would be possible, but at least it really shows what is available and who to call, and,
Great.
yeah.
Your
Very
que-
good.
Your question, though, is interesting in this sense that even though we have a website, it might be helpful if we could develop some sort of 360 view of some of the more historic rooms in there, very much like buying a piece of real estate, where you are able to view the property without even being in the community.
Right,
And
kind of
so
like
that-
Zillow,
Yes.
where you want to look at a property and it
Yes.
tells you everything about it.
Yes, yes, very, very true. So we can certainly explore that possibility as well.
That would be great. I think if we're going to get people interested in appreciating it, that's a good way to start.
Thank you. Mr. Fritzen?
I have a few questions, whether Mrs. Kennett or Mr. Strand or staff could respond, but I know, this is something we were asked about some time back to see if we had an interest in pursuing something like this, so the staff knew it was good to work with you, and I think inclined to approve an agreement as such for a lot of good reasons to do so. One, it is adjacent already to one of our historic neighborhoods, and it would be it'd be a shame to see something else happen on that property that would not be complementary to that. But I know when this was first brought to our attention, the idea was that the ongoing repairs and maintenance of the facility and the like were probably more than, or as you stated, more really than what you're able to handle budgetarily. And so, the question to us was, would we be interested in pursuing an agreement where the town might participate in that and help keep it a viable property. And so, obviously, that's where this agreement goes, but it also goes a bit beyond that. So I guess I'm looking for some information here, like for instance, utilities is included, so that to me is something that goes beyond repairs and maintenance on the property. That's a daily operational expense, and so I guess the question on that in particular would be, I presume, I'm sure this, because of the due diligence, the staff always applies these types of things. You've seen financial statements and the like and their operating budget, and it wouldn't be in the agreement if you didn't think that was something that was going to be necessary for us to help in this manner. But I guess I need some sense of exactly what, where we came up with that. A couple other things. On the routine maintenance, we talk about 1,500 hours per year of routine maintenance on the property. That's about 4 hours a day, every day of the year for somebody to be on that property. And I know a good boyhood friend of mine at one time was a full-time maintenance worker there, Mike Rudolph, who unfortunately isn't with us anymore. But Mike worked there, I know, full-time, did a lot of work, especially on the brick wall and whatever surrounding the property at the time, because it was in disrepair, and so it is a big piece of property. There is a lot to do there, but that's a big chunk of man hours, and perhaps that's maybe a conservative estimate just to make sure we've got enough in there to cover these things. Also, the repair and replacement, the $10,000 figure there, I'm guessing that perhaps that's based on some historical data that says on an average year, we've got quite a few projects that just add up on a property of that age. I don't know. I guess what I'm looking for is just some feedback to fill in some of the background on where we came up with these numbers. And then the last question I would have is on the restoration and remodel projects. Is that a paragraph thrown in there just in case something like this comes up? Because, we don't own the property at this point in time. Obviously, with the restricted funds that the foundation has, I wouldn't think they would undertake anything like that, but I suppose you have it in an agreement like this just in case a proposal comes up, because with the new use, the new ideas that you've presented to us here tonight, I suppose a need could present itself that you haven't anticipated, and all of a sudden this new exposure, new usage, and whatever might lead to that. So those are the things that I'm looking for, I guess, some background from any of you on to kind of help me sort out the number, because the total number, though it's not a huge number in light of our entire budget, is a pretty big number compared to maybe our initial discussions of some assistance for repairs and maintenance on the property. So I'll quit talking and let you fill it in.
Let me take a stab, and then others can chime in. In general terms, well, first of all, the specific terms of the agreement came about through negotiations. We didn't have a perfectly clear understanding once we started, but as we got into it, we hopefully have a better handle on what it takes to maintain this property, and to be sure, it is an expensive property to maintain. I think that's exactly why the foundation made that very difficult decision, as Ms. Kennett described, to sell the mansion, because it's not an inexpensive undertaking just to keep that property maintained. And I will say, from everything that we've been able to see, it's been extremely well maintained. For a turn of the century structure, it's in very, very good condition. So kudos to the foundation for doing what was right and spending a lot of money maintaining it. So it's an expensive facility to maintain, and again, as the foundation was looking at their own finances and trying to determine what they could handle long-term, and this was really, I think their focus was on the long-term health of the foundation. It's not as if they're penniless. They do have money, which is good. We want them to be successful, but they just felt that these annual expenses were getting to the point where it was drawing down their endowment and would certainly limit their ability to fund other programs. So the utilities kind of came up during that conversation as something they felt that they, even though not individually a large amount, they felt it was one of those things that really drove them to decide that long-term that this is one of those expenses that he just didn't feel comfortable continuing to have every year. I will also say that the number, and we provided an estimate of cost in the packet, and I will tell you that's a conservative number. I would hope that it's less than that, but this is an unusual facility. It's not the type of facility that we routinely maintain, and Mark Clinch, our facilities director, who I must say is very excited about the opportunity to maintain this wonderful facility, acknowledged that until we actually have some experience there, it's really hard to know for sure. So he developed these estimates, and by his own admission, they're pretty conservative. So we hope, frankly, we'll be able to do it for less than that. But a big part of the amount of hours required is also the grounds maintenance. And it's a pretty substantial site with lots of landscaping that requires maintenance and other things. They do have, there are periods of time where there's not a lot of activity in the mansion, but there are also periods, and I think we'll see more of that, where there is quite a bit of activity, which is going to increase the interior maintenance obligation. So the numbers in the packet are our best guess today. Again, I think they're on the conservative side. Even the major repairs, we assumed $7,500 a year. My guess is there will be years where it will be more than that, and there will be years where it will be minimal. So that's kind of a guesstimate. We did go back and look at utility costs over a period of time. We felt that $7,000 is probably a little conservative. Hopefully we won't have too many winters like the last one, but we felt that's a safe number. So I guess in closing, I'll say it's not an inexpensive building to maintain. It's critically important that it be well maintained. It's not the kind of building that we can just throw any person in to handle. It's special. It requires special consideration, and just the millwork in there alone has to be dealt with very sensitively. But I think our people are up to the challenge. We will probably, for part of the work, we will probably use a contract service provider for some of it, and some of it we probably will use in-house people. That will kind of sort itself out as we get in there and have some experience. But it's not inexpensive. If we take this responsibility very seriously, we want to make sure that the building that it's a well-maintained under our watch, as it has been under the foundation's watch. And but again, hopefully we can come in a little bit cheaper than what the budget suggests, but won't know for sure till we actually have some experience.
I have one other thought about that. Many of the activities that we plan there, they're small. We don't do any big things there. The women's celebration, for instance, is at the Marriott. And we plan in the future, as these programs grow, if we need to go outside of the mansion, we won't have a big meeting or a big thing. We'll use outside sources for some of those things. So we're aware of what the mansion can do and what makes sense to make this possible.
If I might, Mr. Fritzen, comment also that one of the things that we hope to accomplish with this partnership and with the historical preservation designation is that there are certain types of grants that might be available that can minimize some of the costs associated with the maintenance, refurbishing of the facility. And then to get into the specifics of what you mentioned, let me start in reverse order. Remodeling. There is a living room area where there has been a false ceiling put in to make the room look more modern, but the original ceiling is still there. So if that false ceiling was taken out of there, that room could be restored to its original state. That's the type of thing. It would take concurrence by both the Town of Normal and the Emmanuel Bible Foundation, but that is one possibility. With regard to repair and maintenance, partnering on that, right now, at the moment, here, this is wood, there is nothing imminent facing us, but again, the possibility of any big bill coming up would be shared, but there will also be a close critical analysis of the need for a certain type of repair. You mentioned the 1,400 hours of maintenance. Currently, we have somebody who is a contract employee for the foundation, and that happened to be the number of hours that that person puts in to take care of the exterior as well as interior. So that figure was not just pulled out of the air. And it is a big property. And with the proper type of person performing those services, we think it can be handled. Now, if, pardon me, if you have more activities there and you have more cleanup costs, hopefully there can be factors built into the charge for those so that you are recovering those and you have come out without any additional financial liability. Your last point was the matter of utilities, and City Manager Peterson addressed that, and that $7,000 figure is what will be paid this year for utilities, and this was a pretty severe winter. So we are hopeful that that figure can be reasonable, and if there's more usage and utility costs go up, hopefully the rate for the use of a facility can be built into utility costs as well as other maintenance costs.
Are your community events basically break-even events? Is that the goal, anyway, to not subsidize the Lenten breakfast or the
Yes.
Yes.
women's Christmas event? Okay. So going forward, I would think perhaps the same thing is, assume you're not for profit, so you have some limitations in what you can do with that. But I for me, it's it would be a sense of loss for me if we were to not do what we can to help see how this goes, if we can help and whatever. As somebody who grew up in the south end of Normal and spent a lot of went to grade school in that neighborhood and grew up around that facility and played ball, Little League ball at Wesleyan there in the shadows of the bell tower. And remember one kid saying his goal was to hit one off the bell tower, but it never. It was Doug Fillmore, by the way, if anybody knows Doug Fillmore. Anyway, I don't think he ever got it done. But so it would be a sense of loss, and even not having the Carolyn. I grew up hearing that all the time as a young guy and whatever, and so you kind of miss those things that were there. But nostalgic reasons aren't enough to invest a lot of money in it. But we didn't have the benefit of your chart in our packet to see the vision of what where you're hoping to take this thing, and I think that helps me. If it had been in the packet, I might not have had a lot of questions, I guess, because the Academy for Music and Arts and the venue use and the historical aspect, and then the Faith Council, having those three things. I mean, those are pretty strong legs to build a foundation for the future on, and I think I like what I see. Just not having been obviously part of the conversation or whatever, but seems to me you've grasped the the things that that it can bring to the community, other than just a pretty place to look at as you drive south on Fell Avenue. So, like I said earlier, I'm inclined to support the proposal, and obviously there are some things there that numbers-wise that were a little bit bigger than what we thought they might be. But again, as Mr. Peterson said, and really in keeping again with how our staff looks at things, they're usually pretty conservative in how they approach things like this. So appreciate the responses on those things.
Ms. Gaines?
Well, speaking of the bell tower, that's what I wanted to ask, because I know that, am I misunderstanding, or is there some need for repair with the bell tower itself, or is it just the clarion that's the issue?
Well, that bell tower will require maintenance, periodic tuck pointing, and I don't know the last time it was tuck pointed. It seems like there had been some tuck point, but it will need some maintenance over the years, no question about it. The Carillon was removed. It was the original one was removed. Then there was an electronic Carillon, I understand, for a while, and that's I'm not sure it's there or it's not operable.
It's still wired
Okay.
for that, and when Mark Boone was our executive director,
Yeah.
he was a great music man, so he wired it for the Carillon, and people in the neighborhood would come over and just love hearing that. And I don't know how much it would take to put it back together again, but he dismantled it at one point. There are no bells there.
Right.
The bells are gone. They're-
Because I guess I would hope that we could maybe somehow figure out how to move forward
Yeah,
to
I
trying to
agree.
get that back,
I
because
agree.
that, as beautiful as the house is, the bell tower to me is the most beautiful in the whole
And that
whole
was the
thing.
one
And then
thing that all of the real estate people looked at it, and they had never talked to each other. They all said, oh, well, they'll want to tear that down. And, you know,
Oh, that would
was one
break
of
my
the
heart.
toughest.
So I don't know if that's something that, we at the town can be talking about, or if that's something that your board could be talking about, or if there could be a special fundraising project just
That
for
would
that.
fall under that major maintenance repair / line item, and I'm glad Dr. Strand mentioned that, because that is there just kind of in case. Mr. Fritzen, you are exactly right. We don't know, but if an opportunity came along, maybe some grant funds that required a local match that we could share, or for whatever reason, you mentioned the ceiling in I guess it's the living room.
Yeah.
That was, now, the interesting thing, that was redone by Mrs. Van Leer. She made that decision, so it's, historically fairly authentic, because the owner did it, and she had her reasons for doing it at the time. But that may be someday we may choose to, maybe there's an opportunity to restore that room to its original look. And, if there's a grant available for that, or some other outside funding source that we could take advantage of, then that might make sense. And the Carillon's the same way. That certainly could be done. I'm sure it's doable. It's just a matter of cost.
Mr. Scott?
Yes, first, thanks, Dr. Strand, Ms. Kennett, for your presentation. And most of my questions have been answered. I think all of the council has toured the facility, and it truly is a remarkable piece of the arts and crafts architecture, and it's really a nice specimen, and it would be a shame for us to see it to deteriorate. But we saw the cosmetics, we saw the skin, but we really didn't see the infrastructure of the facility. I haven't heard to date what the condition of the plumbing, the electrical system, the drainage system, the HVAC, the asbestos-contained materials, those sorts of things. Is there consideration for doing some kind of an assessment of that facility so we can get a better handle on those kinds of infrastructure
Well,
issues?
Mr. Clinch did go through the building, had his own tour. Now, I can't tell you that he, got into every nook and cranny and every crawl space, but I think came away from the tour with the opinion that it's well maintained. Now, with that being said, it's a 1904 building, and things like plumbing and those sorts of things will have to be addressed. But all indications are it has been well maintained, and there doesn't appear to be, at least, without, further investigation, doesn't appear to be any current issues. As you know, they will occur. Water leaks will happen, and those kinds of things, heaven forbid. Hopefully they don't cause a lot of damage, but those things will occur. But we believe that the building is sound. But we have not done some sort of a comprehensive and systematic evaluation of all the systems. No, we haven't. But we have looked beyond just the skin a little bit.
Seems to me that planning for that sort of a more comprehensive overview would help us to budget better out into the future.
I think for budgetary purposes, that is a good idea, because there are things that we know have a limited life, and we'll have to look at replacing, the boiler itself is that's
Right.
quite a significant piece of equipment, and those kinds of things we'll have to look to budget for, so that does make sense.
I also know that there are some code differences between residential properties and properties that are managed by the public. Do we know if we will be compliant with any codes, I don't know, ADA codes or anything like that, or are there plans to bring it into compliance?
It's not completely ADA compliant. It is a historic building, so there's some
Right.
understanding of that. But there are certain types of events that probably couldn't be held there that require full accessibility. And I don't think at this point we have plans to add ramps and lifts and things like that. But otherwise, beyond that, it appears to generally meet most residential I think we don't know of anything in there that would not be code compliant. But ADA, given that it's an old building and you're going upstairs just about anywhere you want to go, you're going upstairs, would be an issue. So it would just have a limit on the types of
Right.
activities that we hold at that location.
And as we said, we will knock on that wood, that we won't have major expenditures in these first few years and the like. Is there some opportunity, or has there been some thought towards, if we don't spend $7,500 a year on maintenance, major maintenance, to put some money into reserves so that we could, in the future, take care of some of those larger ticket items?
Good idea. Yeah, we hadn't thought about that, but certainly a good idea to set that money aside, because they will happen.
They will, absolutely. You got a 100-plus-year-old building, we will have issues, but it's beautifully maintained. Thank you. Thank you.
Mrs. Reese.
I just wanted to go back to some conversation we were having earlier and distinguish the town support for the property from any confusion about town support for programming that you're doing with some of the services that the various breakfasts and so on, that's separate from the program and concern that we have. We have concern for the preservation of the property as a historic site. And I just, sometimes people can confuse those things and say, are you mixing church and state and that sort of thing? And I want to be clear, at least on my intention, that we're not into that confusion. What you all are doing as a programming matter are yours. We don't enter into that, and we don't fund that, and we don't, yeah. So that was my point, to make that clear.
Right. I appreciate what Dorothy has said, and just to add to that, none of the town and normal funds, should this agreement be adopted, will be used to supplement any of the programming activities associated with the Emmanuel Bible Foundation. The only time town and normal funds might be involved is that if there are some operational costs associated with an event that you are sponsoring,
We are
then
sponsored.
there would be some overhead costs that are associated with making sure that it is a break-even event financially.
Right. But that's something we would have sponsored and would already have established the boundaries and the terms for that.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Preston?
Yeah, Dr. Strand, you earlier had commented some on the benefits of the historic landmark designation for the property. Is there a reason that that designation has not been sought out up to this point?
I don't have an answer.
I don't either.
And
I can.
I really don't know why it wasn't sought earlier. It is an oversight on our part to not have sought that. And it is truly a historic facility. And one of the first, one of the most, let me say this, one of the most prominent in Normal. And one of the reasons that I'm so sensitive about that, I'm a relatively new board member, but I came to the university, which is a few blocks away from here, and the Jesse Fell home was torn down shortly after I arrived because of the costs associated with it, and that was a very unfortunate circumstance because now there's student housing on that site. And I would just like to do everything possible to make sure that that sort of circumstance does not occur on the Emmanuel Bible Foundation property at Broadview Mansion.
Mr. Preston, I can answer that. When the Broadview Historic District formed, there was interest in including the mansion at that time, but the board at that time didn't feel it was in the best interests of the foundation to do that, and asked not to be included, and actually was quite firm about not being included in the historic district. So that's the reason it didn't happen at that point.
That's very helpful to hear that, Mayor Coos.
Thank you. And then a question for staff too, I believe. If we're projecting to invest $73,400, give or take, is there a reason, though we don't have the intention of acquiring the property or owning it from the town standpoint at this point, is there a reason why in our right of first refusal agreement, the value at which we would hypothetically purchase the property only decreases by $50,000 a year when we're putting in roughly 1.5 times that plus the man hours of maintenance?
When that provision was negotiated, we didn't know for sure what the costs would be. We were kind of guessing they'd be around 50, and they may end up being closer to 50 than 73. We're again being conservative in our estimates, and we just felt that was a reasonable amount to go down every year. Again, not knowing for sure then what our cost would be, we assumed 50 was probably a good estimate. As we refined it, it got a little higher, and again, we're conservative, so that's really the reason. And we frankly don't expect to have to invoke that provision, but it's there just in case something happens in the future that none of us can anticipate today, and it does ensure that if indeed the board decides to sell the property, or if the foundation for whatever reason would dissolve, it would ensure that we would at least have the right to acquire the property and continue to maintain it as a historic structure. We hope that doesn't happen because there's really no advantage to the town to own it. In fact, there's disadvantages because then we have some additional costs that we'd rather not have. And the benefit to I think, the town is just to keep that facility restored and available to the public. So owning it really has no advantage that I see it to the town. But that's when that provision was negotiated, we didn't know for sure what the annual cost would be. So we agreed to $50,000 as kind of a reasonable annual amount.
Thanks.
Mr. McCarthy?
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Kennett and Dr. Strand and staff. I'm a big fan of the property. I like old homes and all the millwork, and so love the property. And most of my questions have already been answered by my more experienced, wise council persons. But for staff and Mr. Peterson, I appreciate that this is a yearly renewable contract, although our intention is to continue support to maintain the property and keep it as it is that I just ask that we come back a year afterwards and kind of a review and be able to talk about what the costs actually are and and where we are, and be able to have that discussion a year from now.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is, excuse me, this has been an unusual process for municipal governments to get involved in projects like this, but this is a unique situation and a very, very important structure to our community. As Dr. Strand alluded to, the fact that in an explosive period of growth in the 1970s and that, the town lost a lot of its historic character because of expansion of the university and other things that were happening in the community. And the fact that we have this property, which is a very unique property, in my opinion, maybe one of the finest, if not the finest pieces of architecture and best maintained pieces of architecture in our community. And it's really become iconic to people that live in the community. I was going to ask Mr. Fritzen if, as a young child, did he ever get kicked off of the property, because I can say I did. But again, it's not the usual course of business for a municipality, and I think we're doing a good thing for the community in the long term here. I would respond to your 4 hours a day as an owner of a 1923 house, 2,100 square feet. Sometimes I think I put about 4 hours of maintenance a day in that property. But a very good discussion here tonight and some great questions to be asked. And, you know, I sense a lot of support here, and I'm very adamantly supporting this project as something that is really important and good for the town of Normal. Further? Please call the roll.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. Scott?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mrs. Reese?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The resolution is approved. We have no new business tonight. Before a motion for adjournment, are there concerns or comments? Motion for adjournment, thank you.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. Scott?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mrs. Reese?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
We're adjourned, thank you.
I want to go see it. I've never seen it.
Fine, thank you.
Our sesquicentennial is next year. Tom's our sesquicentennial. It is? On the property. Oh, yes. And we've talked about it.
Thank you. Excellent job.
Oh, thank you.
Beautiful
so
job.
much. Thank you.
You did a
so
great
much.
job.
We'll talk. Sure.
My name's Steve Robinson with the Normal Light Weekly paper.
Hi, Steve.
I got your first name, but I want to get your last name.
Okay, it's Kennett, and it is like Bennett with a K.
And
Right.
you got a title in front of you, or is it just
Mrs. or Bill?
okay? I didn't want to
Yeah.
bypass a doctor if I had one
No.
in front of me. How many square feet is the house?
Oh, I don't know. I know. I have no idea.
Okay. Would Dr. Strand know?